Guys, my name is Mode, and today I'm going to be talking about prions. So, focus of talk, we're going to go over the importance of topic, current understanding of issues, impacts on human health, unsolved problems and concerns, and ecology. So, importance of topic, what is a prion? It's a proteinaceous infectious particle, and a prion is a protein that encourages normal proteins in the brain to fold abnormally. And what happens when you have a prion? Prions cause a variety of neurodegenerative diseases, and it's most commonly referred to as mad cow disease. Then a little bit of history about prions, about the United Kingdom outbreak. So cows began having a lot of infections by prions in the 1980s and 1990s, and then humans would consume, like hamburgers or whatnot, and then that's one way that prions can be transmitted to humans. And then in the 2000s, there was a successful vaccine, but it only slowed the effects of prions. It didn't completely stop prions from denaturing normal proteins, but research is continuously being done to develop a successful vaccine. And then current understanding of issues. So prions are divided into two categories. So there's human prion diseases and animal prion diseases. And the main ones I'm going to be covering for humans is CJD and VCJD. And then for animals, I'm going to be talking a little bit about BSE and CWD. And then at the bottom, I just have two pictures, and there's a brain, and the left side of the brain is normal, and then the right side of the brain is someone that has CJD. And then I have a picture of a cow, of what the cattle look like if they have BSE. And then continuing, so prion diseases are caused by transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, or it's also known as TSEs. And then the name derives from the spongy hole seen in infected brain tissue under the microscope. And then transmission, specifically CJD, is transmitted in three different forms. There is sporadically, by inheritance, and by contamination. So most people develop it sporadically, and whenever that happens, it happens for no apparent reason. And it's also known as spontaneous or sporadic CJD. And then inheritance, it's fewer than 15% of people develop it this way because of genetic mutations. It's also known as familial CJD. And then contamination is the smallest way that people can develop it. And it happens because of contaminated surgical instruments, because CJD cannot be killed by standard sterilization. It can only be killed by 900-degree Fahrenheit heat that's applied for several hours. Then impacts on human health, so symptoms specifically. So cognitive is memory loss and impaired thinking. Muscular is sudden jerky movements, difficulty speaking or swallowing. Mood is anxiety, psychological depression, and then also common is insomnia, personality changes, blurred vision, or blindness. And then overall what will happen to someone that has this disease is they'll eventually go into a coma, and then during the coma they'll either have heart or respiratory failure, or develop infections, like pneumonia is really common. And then because their nervous system doesn't work, nothing works, so death will usually occur within a year. And then continuing on, risk factors, so there's age, genetics, and contamination again. So for age, people around 60 are usually the group that develop it, but people that have familial CJD usually develop it slightly earlier. And then people that get VCJD typically develop it in their late 20s. And then genetic, so it's inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion, so only one copy of the gene is needed from one parent, and if you do have it, then you have a 50% chance of passing it on to your children. And then contamination, it's by growth hormone injections or grafts of dura mater. And dura mater is the membrane that covers the brain. And these both introduce the risk of CJD. And then VCJD is honestly non-existent as long as you follow public health measures, like cook your meat correctly, and as long as the farmers are following the laws to harvest their cow meat correctly. Okay, and then complications. So people with CJD tend to withdraw from family and friends, and they lose the ability to recognize and relate to people, and they lose the ability to care for themselves. And then unsolved problems and concerns. So there is a little bit of prevention, but it's only for CJD spread by contamination. There's no prevention for sporadic CJD or inherited CJD. And the preventative measures for that are using synthetic human growth hormone instead of taking it from the pituitary gland of a donor. You want to use synthetic so you don't risk getting that disease. And then destruction of surgical instruments used on people suspected to have CJD. And then restrictions on blood donations, so people that have received human growth hormone or dural matter grafts. And then people that have traveled to or received a blood transfusion in Europe from 1980 to 1996. And the blood one is still something that scientists fight about. Some of them say yes, it's transmitted through blood. Some of them say no, but we don't really know yet. So that's just another preventative measure they like to do. And then there's also the regulation of cattle. So there's strict cattle feed, restrictions on importation of cattle where BSE is common, strict procedures for dealing with sick cattle, tracking cattle health, and then restrictions on which part of the cattle can be processed for food. And then the ecology, I couldn't find a lot on this one for prions, so I kind of did my own thing. So first I started with the sick cattle. So cattle with unknown BSE are made into food for other cattle, but now it's not allowed, but it used to be. So cattle would eat other cattle, and then that's how the BSE would be transmitted to cows unknowingly. And then there would be food production for us, and then from that people would get VCJD. And then there's also a little diagram I found for CWD, which is in like deer, moose, elk, caribou, kind of like that wildlife. So what happens is the deer will urinate into a lake or on plants, and then another one will eat that, and then that's how they get the prions inside of them. And then in conclusions, prions cause a variety of neurodegenerative diseases, and knowledge on these proteins gained popularity during the United Kingdom outbreak. Prions are caused by TSCs. Prions cause normal proteins in the brain to fold abnormally. Prions are split into two categories, human and animal prion diseases. Prion diseases in humans usually result in dementia, heart/respiratory failure, and infections during a coma, then death. Prion diseases in cattle result in nervous system degeneration, then death. Preventative measures exist, but there is no cure for prions. And regulations of cattle are strictly monitored. CJD is transmitted sporadically by inheritance or by contamination, while VCJD is transmitted through infected cattle meat. BSE is transmitted through infected cattle feed, and there's continuous research on vaccines to inhibit prions. And there's my sources.